Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere cold, damp, and uncomfortably real. The world of soldiers' meals during World War II. You're not in a five-star restaurant tonight. You're waking up in a muddy foxhole somewhere in Europe, surrounded by the sound of boots squelching, rifles clicking, and the faint smell of instant coffee mixed with gun oil. Yeah, you probably wouldn't survive breakfast out here, but don't worry, you just have to listen. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the chill of dawn, your boots heavy with mud that's trying its best to keep you from standing. Your stomach growls, not politely, but with the low grumble of a neglected engine. In your hand, a small brown box, your breakfast. It's called a ration. Sounds futuristic, right? Like some kind of 1940s protein innovation. But no, it's a brick of processed calories meant to keep you alive. Not impressed. You pry it open. Inside, a few dry biscuits that crumble like sand under your fingers. A can of something labeled meat product, and a packet of instant coffee powder. There's even a small slab of chocolate that looks brave, but tastes ... functional. The army promised it would sustain a soldier for one meal. What they didn't mention was the emotional trauma of eating something that feels like punishment from the gods of nutrition, the coffee. Well, coffee. You dissolve brown dust into tepid water and try to pretend it's from your favorite diner back home. It's so bitter it could strip paint, but it's warm, and warmth is currency out here. Some soldiers joked that it could clean rifle barrels. Others swore it kept them sane. Historians still argue whether the caffeine really made a difference, or if it was just the comfort of holding a hot cup in a world gone mad. You sip slowly, careful not to spill a drop. That heat feels like luxury against the biting wind. Around you, men stir, groaning awake, wrapping scarves tighter, muttering curses at the cold. Somewhere nearby, a harmonica hums a sleepy tune, something like home, but thinner, more fragile. Someone opens their ration and finds a piece of gum. Hey, he laughs. Breakfast and dental hygiene in one. The others chuckle. Small jokes like that, they keep the morning alive. You sit on your pack, using a helmet as a makeshift bowl, stirring instant oatmeal that tastes suspiciously like wallpaper paste. But you eat it anyway. Calories mean strength. Strength means another day. Mainstream fact: rations were first designed in 1941 by a physiologist named Ansel Keys. He tested them on soldiers to see if they'd survive long field missions with just those little boxes. Turns out they did, barely. The meals were scientifically balanced, but spiritually depressing. Quirky tidbit: soldiers often kept the little cardboard boxes after eating, not for sentiment, but practicality. They used them as notepads, fire starters, or even toilet paper when supply lines failed. Yes, the humble ration served more purposes than its inventors probably intended. As the sun drags itself above the horizon, the landscape starts to reveal itself. Broken trees, metal debris, the distant echo of an engine that never quite stops. You take another bite of the meatloaf that refuses to taste like meat. The texture, somewhere between rubber and regret. A friend next to you mutters, "If we survive this, I'm never complaining about my mother's cooking again." You laugh through your nose, a quiet, sleepy sound. You both know he's right. Some historians argue that the psychological toll of repetitive, bland meals was underestimated. Food wasn't just fuel. It was morale, memory, identity. And when every breakfast tasted like yesterday, and the day before that, time itself began to blur. You can almost smell bacon from a past life, maybe from a diner in Kansas or a kitchen in London. But here, the smell that greets you is cold air, gunpowder, and damp earth. Still, you chew, because you have to, because stopping isn't an option. Somewhere, a soldier carefully folds the wax paper. His crackers came in, maybe to write a note, maybe to line his pocket. Small rituals help. In a world of chaos, eating breakfast, even one like this, is a reminder of control. You finish your meal, wipe your mouth with your sleeve, and glance at the canteen cup one last time. The dregs of coffee swirl like mud, tiny ripples catching the weak sunlight. You take one final sip, just for the illusion of comfort. And then orders come. You stand, sling your pack, and begin to move. The rations are gone, but the taste lingers, metallic, bitter, unforgettable. As your boots crunch over frost, you think about what dinner might be, maybe the same, maybe worse. But for now, at least, your stomach is full enough to forget it's morning in a war. You glance back at the spot where you ate. A little rectangle of cardboard lies half buried in the mud, stamped Ration breakfast unit. It looks almost peaceful, like a tiny grave marker for comfort itself. And you keep walking. You walk until the sun climbs high enough to burn off the mist, and the air smells less like night and more like sweat and machine oil. Your stomach already grumbles again. Rations never last long, and when someone shouts lunch break, it sounds like a gift from heaven. You drop your pack beside a crumbling wall and pull out a dull silver tin, canned meat and vegetable hash, or at least that's what the label promises. The can's dented, the key on the side is missing, and you resort to prying it open with your bayonet. The lid bends, hisses, and releases a puff of smell so strong it could double as a bug repellent. There it is, your meal and your morale, all in one trembling can. Inside, something grayish-brown, flecked with orange and green. You can't tell if it's meat or memory. You poke it with your spoon, and it jiggles slightly, like it's trying to breathe. Canned courage, someone mutters nearby, and everyone chuckles, because laughter helps it go down easier. You take a bite, salty, mushy, oddly sweet. It's not bad, exactly, just industrial. Food built by engineers, not chefs. Historians still argue whether these canned meals were culinary miracles of wartime logistics or nutritional crimes against humanity. You decide it's both. A fun fact to chew on, literally. These tins were coated with lead-based solder early in the war. That meant a long campaign could mean a slow poisoning. Soldiers didn't know, of course. They just thought the metallic temps was part of the flavor. Across the clearing, someone pops open a can of stew. The hiss sounds like applause. A cloud of greasy steam rises, and for a fleeting second, the camp smells like a cheap diner. Another soldier offers you a bite of his meatballs, which look suspiciously identical to your hash. You swap cans just for the illusion of variety. It doesn't help. Still, canned food kept armies alive. During the war, entire factories switched from making soups for civilians to producing rations for soldiers. Campbell's, Heinz, Hormel, the companies that fed families now fed fighters. Every bite you take connects you to a factory line somewhere back home. A reminder that even in chaos, industry doesn't sleep. You find a small tin labeled peach slices. You open it carefully. Dessert is sacred. The syrupy scent hits your nose, and suddenly it feels like summer. For a moment, you're not in France or the Pacific or North Africa. You're back home, sitting under a tree, spooning sweet fruit from a jar while your mother calls from the porch. The world feels edible again. But then a plane drones overhead and the fantasy evaporates. You duck instinctively, spilling syrup onto your sleeve. Someone laughs, "Don't waste it, man," and you smile weakly. In war, even a drop of peach syrup feels like gold. Mainstream historical fact: canned foods revolutionized military logistics. Armies could now feed millions on the move. Napoleon's army had tried a similar idea over a century earlier. But it wasn't until World War II that tin cans became as vital as bullets. The convenience was unmatched. Open, eat, move, repeat. Quirky tidbit: soldiers sometimes used empty cans as cooking pots, helmets for rats, or improvised telephones during downtime. 2 tins, a long wire, and suddenly boredom turned into battlefield science fair. Someone nearby's can bursts into flame, too close to the campfire. The goo inside sputters, popping like fireworks. Everyone laughs again, the kind of weary laughter that lives halfway between exhaustion and hysteria. "Guess dinner's hot," someone says, fanning the smoke. You keep eating. The food doesn't change, but your expectations do. Each spoonful becomes less about pleasure and more about ritual, proof that you're still here, still human. You can almost taste the irony. The same can that sustains you could also be used to patch a jeep or make shrapnel. War is full of practical poetry like that. Someone starts humming off-key but steady, a swing tune from the radio. You tap your spoon against the can, joining in. For a brief moment, there's music, rhythm, and the faint illusion of peace. You finish your meal and scrape the can clean. It feels wrong to leave food, even bad food, uneaten. You crush the tin under your boot, the metal crack echoing like punctuation in the afternoon quiet. The sky's getting cloudy again, the air heavy with that pre-rain smell. You pack up, sling your rifle, and glance down at your hands, sticky with peach syrup, streaked with dirt, trembling a little from the caffeine and cold. You lick one finger clean, half a joke, half survival instinct. "5-star lunch," you mutter. Someone replies, "Yeah, Michelin-starred mud." You both grin. Historians still argue whether canned food shortened the war by keeping armies fed or just prolonged human endurance through tinned misery. But for you, right now, it's simple. You're alive. Your belly's not empty. And for a soldier, that's enough. You shoulder your pack again as the first drops of rain start to fall. The tin can, flattened, gleams in the mud like a tiny medal. One more relic in a war built on the strange brilliance of staying fed when the world itself seemed to be starving. You can smell it before you even see it, that faint chemical temps of powdered eggs. It clings to the air like chalk dust, floating in lazy swirls over a camp stove that's seen too many mornings. You kneel beside it, rubbing your hands together for warmth, watching the cook stir a dented pot with a spoon that's probably older than you are. The mixture inside looks like wet sand at low tide. Breakfast is, once again, an act of faith. Someone nearby mutters, "Smells like school glue," and you laugh, quietly, because laughter costs energy. You take your mess tin, wait your turn, and watch the yellow slurry slide into it. It wobbles once, settles, and steams faintly in the cold. Congratulations, you've been served scrambled eggs without any actual eggs. This isn't luxury, it's logistics. Powdered eggs were a marvel of preservation, dehydrated, sealed, and shipped across oceans. Mainstream historians agree they were a game changer, a miracle of modern supply chains. Soldiers could have fresh eggs anywhere on Earth, theoretically. In practice, well, you scoop a spoonful and find out that theory tastes suspiciously like disappointment. You chew slowly, pretending it's breakfast at home. Maybe there's toast, maybe there's butter, maybe your mother's voice is somewhere in the background. But here, there's only the low murmur of men eating and the distant thud of artillery. The eggs stick to your teeth. You chase them with a gulp of instant coffee that tastes faintly of regret and tin. Quirky tidbit. Soldiers used to joke that powdered eggs were proof that science had gone too far. Some even used the powder as makeshift glue. Mix it thick enough, and it could patch torn boots. Others found it doubled as camouflage paint when mixed with mud. You might not get nutrition, but you did get innovation. The cook, a grizzled sergeant from Texas, wipes his hands and shouts, "Eat up, boys. The hens are tired today." It gets a few chuckles, mostly because everyone's too tired to do more than smile. Humor becomes a condiment. It doesn't add flavor, but it helps the meal go down. You take another bite. It's bland, but it's warm. Warmth counts. It settles in your stomach like a small campfire, faint but steady. The man across from you stirs his eggs into his oatmeal, muttering, "If you can't taste it, it can't hurt you." He might be onto something. Historians still argue whether powdered eggs were truly effective nutrition or just morale theater, something to make soldiers feel like they were eating real food. Calories mattered, sure, but so did illusion. The body could survive on science. The soul needed Sunday breakfast. You notice a few men trading packets of jam, saving sugar cubes like their treasure. One soldier pulls a tin of bacon substitute from his pack. It smells vaguely smoky, like someone had once described bacon to an alien. He slices off a sliver, offers you some. You accept. It tastes rubbery but rich, like memory reheated. Rain begins to fall again, slow and polite at first. The camp shifts under gray skies. Tarps are pulled tighter. Fires hiss. Conversation fades. You hunch over your tin to keep the food warm. Drops tap the metal like tiny drums. Somewhere, a radio crackles through static. Glenn Miller, maybe. The melody is faint, dreamy. You find yourself humming along, spoon moving rhythmically, matching the beat of home you can almost remember. One soldier nearby complains. They say breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Guess they didn't mean this breakfast. Someone answers, "Nah, it's important. Reminds you to stay alive for lunch." Everyone laughs softly. War humor is dry, but it works. You think about how strange it is. Millions of men across continents, all eating the same yellow paste at the same time. Americans, Brits, Australians, different uniforms, same taste of science. Food becomes a common language, a shared misery, a quiet connection. You finish the last of it, scraping the tin clean with your spoon. The texture lingers, grainy, stubborn, unforgettable. The cook collects empty tins, stacking them like trophies of endurance. You hand yours over, fingers numb, breath misting in the cold. He grins and says, "See you boys at dinner. We're having soup." The way he says it, you'd think it was steak. You stand, stretch your aching back, and sling your pack. Around you, the world is wet and gray, but alive. Someone lights a cigarette. Someone else breaks into a soft whistle. The morning moves on, indifferent but steady. As you walk away, your boots squelch through puddles, leaving brief, vanishing prints. You glance down at the mud. It's the same yellow-brown shade as the powdered eggs. You laugh quietly to yourself, shaking your head. The world out here feels like one big breakfast that never ends. Still, in some strange way, you'll remember this meal. Not for its taste, but for its honesty. It didn't pretend to be good, it just was. And as you march, the smell clings to your uniform, chalk, coffee, and rain. The scent of survival, simple and sleepy. You halfway through the day when you feel it, that dull ache of hunger creeping back in like a slow tide. Your pack rattles with a few remaining treasures, a can of stew, some crackers, and one very suspicious-looking chocolate bar. The label says U.S. Army Ration. You've heard rumors about this thing. Some say it's indestructible. Others claim it's the closest humanity has ever come to edible concrete. You unwrap it carefully, the paper stiff with moisture. Inside lies a solid brown block that glints faintly in the light, like it's made of compressed ambition. You bite into it, or try to. Your teeth protest instantly. It doesn't melt, doesn't crumble, just exists, defying both logic and enamel. Somewhere in the distance, a tooth fairy loses her wings. The taste is challenging. Bitter cocoa, powdered milk, and sugar, all bound together in an unholy alliance of survival. The flavor sits somewhere between old candle wax and bravery. You chew slowly, jaw muscles working like gears in an old tank. This isn't dessert. It's discipline in chocolate form. Mainstream historical fact. The Ration was designed by the Hershey Company in 1937 at the request of the U.S. Army. The brief was simple. Make a chocolate bar that wouldn't melt in tropical heat, wouldn't taste too good so soldiers wouldn't eat it too fast, and would keep them alive in emergencies. Mission accomplished, perhaps too well. You try to soften it by holding a small piece in your canteen cup of hot water. It barely budges, like it's mocking you. Indestructible, you mutter. Good for morale, bad for teeth. Quirky tidbit. Some soldiers used D-ration bars as improvised tools, hammering nails, leveling tent stakes, or even wedging them under wobbly equipment. A few even mailed them home as curiosities, with notes like, "Dear Mom, if civilization collapses, use this to build a new one." You sit beside a muddy truck tire, watching steam rise from your canteen cup, the faint smell of chocolate. If you squint, your imagination mingles with diesel fumes and rain. Across from you, a soldier from New Jersey, gnaws at his own ration, grimacing. "I think my jaw just enlisted," he says. You both laugh softly, a shared moment of absurdity. Historians still argue, you think, whether this was food or psychological warfare. It's hard to tell. The bar was meant to provide 600 calories, but most soldiers couldn't stomach that much at once. Some swore it was meant to test loyalty. If you ate it without complaint, you deserved a medal. You break off another chunk, let it sit on your tongue, waiting for it to soften. Slowly, it yields. The bitterness deepens, almost earthy now, like chewing on burnt wood. You swallow hard, chasing it with a sip of warm water. Your stomach accepts it like a truce. Someone nearby starts reminiscing about Hershey bars back home, about movie theaters and candy shops and dates that ended with sticky fingers and laughter. The conversation drifts like smoke, fragile but warm. For a few minutes, the war fades into the background. All that exists is the memory of sweetness, the idea of normal life. Then a truck backfires. Everyone jumps. Reality snaps back into place. The chocolate bar, half-eaten, feels heavier in your hand, like it's absorbed some of the noise. You tuck the rest carefully into your jacket pocket. Waste nothing, not even this. Later that night, you'll find yourself nibbling it again, tiny bites at a time, as if rationing courage itself. Out here, chocolate isn't luxury, it's symbolism. Proof that somewhere people are still making candy, still believing in sweetness amid chaos. You remember reading, or maybe hearing, that during the war, cocoa was as tightly guarded as ammunition. Ships full of the stuff crossed submarine-infested waters, just to keep morale high. The world really did fight for chocolate. A small joke circles the camp. If the Axis had tasted this stuff, they'd have surrendered early. You chuckle to yourself. The laughter echoes softly in the cold air, swallowed by the night. You lean back against your pack, feeling the slow burn of calories in your stomach. For the first time all day, you're almost full. Not satisfied, but full. A small, crucial difference. In the distance, someone hums a tune. "I'll be seeing you." It's barely audible, but the melody finds you, winding its way between tents and smoke. You close your eyes for a second and picture a real bar of Hershey's, melting just enough to stick to your fingers, sweet and messy. But when you open your eyes, there's only the duration, hard, square, unyielding. You smile at it, because somehow it represents everything about this war. Ugly, efficient, impossible to forget. You wrap it back up carefully, smoothing the edges of the paper. The label reads, U.S. Army Field Ration, DI Emergency. You whisper, "Emergency accepted," and tuck it away. Tomorrow, maybe, you'll get lucky and trade it for a cigarette or a real chocolate bar from a care package. But tonight, it's yours. Your small block of strength disguised as desert. And as the camp grows quiet, as the stars peek through the smoke, you think, somewhere out there, someone is sitting in a warm kitchen, breaking chocolate into cookies. You wonder if they'd believe this bar could stop a bullet if thrown hard enough. Probably not. But you smile anyway. The afternoon drifts by in shades of gray and smoke. When the call finally comes, chow line, move it. It's almost a relief. You stretch, brush the mud from your sleeves, and follow the smell. It's faint but distinct, boiled something, a hint of onion, and that unmistakable undertone of army-issued grease. You round the corner of a truck, and there it is, the heart of any moving army, the field kitchen. It's a beast on wheels, part truck, part cauldron, part miracle. Steam hisses from pipes. The cooks, usually big men with rolled-up sleeves and cigarette-stained fingers, move like conductors of a strange, edible orchestra. You step closer, watching a ladle disappear into a pot large enough to drown in. Out comes a thick, bubbling stew that smells. Not bad, actually. Next, one of them barks. You hold out your mess tin, and the stew lands with a satisfying plop. A chunk of potato, some slivers of carrot, maybe even beef if luck's on your side. The cook gives a wink. Canned courage, hot addition. You grin. Yeah, that tracks. Mainstream historical fact. Mobile field kitchens, or rolling kitchens, were logistical masterpieces. Each one could feed hundreds of soldiers per meal, using whatever ingredients were available. They could roll right up behind the front line, boiling, frying, and baking under fire if they had to. To a soldier, that smell of hot food meant safety, even if it lasted only 10 minutes. You find a spot on an overturned ammo crate, spoon in hand. The stew is salty, oily, but delicious in its own ugly way. You savor it like fine cuisine. Around you, men eat in silence, punctuated by the occasional sigh. There's no talking when food's this good. Someone near you murmurs, "Tastes like home," if you squint. You nod, mouthful. A soldier farther down the line cracks a joke about the stew being the same color as the mud it came from. Laughter rolls through the camp, weary but real. It's strange. The louder the shells in the distance, the more jokes appear. Maybe humor and fear live in the same corner of the brain. Quirky tidbit. Soldiers sometimes named their field kitchens like pets. Betsy, all smoky, or Mildred. One famous British unit even painted their mobile cook unit with pin-up girls and wrote meals on wheels across the side. In a world where death had no sense of humor, the cooks made sure dinner did. You scoop another bite and chew slowly. The potatoes are soft, the meat chewy but tender enough. You close your eyes for a second, letting the warmth creep through your chest. For a fleeting moment, you could almost forget where you are. Historians still argue whether field kitchens truly improved morale or just gave soldiers something to miss when they were gone. Either way, when that truck showed up, spirits lifted like bread in an oven. "Hey," says a voice beside you. "You ever think how weird it is that we remember this stuff more than anything else?" You shrug. "Depends on what this stuff is. The food," he says. "You'd think it'd be the battles. But nah, it's always the food." You can't help but agree. Food is memory made edible. When you're done, you lick the spoon. Clean habit, not hunger. Around you, soldiers scrape their tins, spotless. There's something ritualistic about it, almost reverent. You look up just in time to see one of the cooks light a cigarette with his ladle still in hand. He grins and says, "Another day, another dinner nobody died for." Everyone cheers softly, the kind of applause that doesn't need volume. The smell of smoke mingles with stew steam, wrapping the camp in a sleepy fog. Someone pulls out a deck of cards. Someone else hums a tune that might be "Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree." You realize that in this brief pause, the world feels suspended, neither war nor peace, just existence. A gust of wind blows through, carrying the smell of onions and diesel. It's oddly comforting. You remember a Sunday afternoon at home, your mother cooking, your father reading the paper. You can almost hear the clatter of plates, the radio murmuring in the background. Then a shout breaks the spell. Pack up, move out in 15. You sigh, standing slowly. The spell of stew and laughter dissolves into motion again. You rinse your tin with a splash of canteen water, wipe it dry with a sleeve, and slip it back into your pack. The warmth in your belly lingers, stubbornly defying the cold. As you pass the kitchen truck, you catch a last glimpse of the cooks scrubbing pots, steam rising around them like halos. One of them waves a ladle at you. Same time tomorrow, soldier. You nod, half smiling. You know he's lying. Tomorrow there might not be a tomorrow, but you appreciate the thought. You trudge away, boots sinking into soft ground, feeling a little more human than you did an hour ago. Funny, you think, how sometimes survival smells like stew. The rations of the early war years have gotten you this far, but now you're somewhere in Italy, 1943, and you can't help but notice how everything tastes slightly like dust and gun oil. You're sitting cross-legged beside a broken stone wall, your helmet turned upside down to hold a few sad beans swimming in watery tomato paste. Someone beside you is trying to toast a bit of stale bread on the end of a bayonet, while another hums a song so off-key it almost counts as bravery. You wonder what S in your ration this time may be meat and beans, or, if you're unlucky, ham and lima beans, the combination that could make even the enemy surrender from despair. You peel open the can with your pocket knife, the hiss of metal almost soothing in its routine. The smell isn't awful, but it's definitely not good. You poke it with your spoon, and it quivers like it's considering its own escape. You eat it anyway, because hunger trumps hesitation every time. These rations, officially called combat rations, Type C, were designed to be all you needed, a full day's meal in a set of cans that fit neatly in a soldier's pack. In theory, they provided about 3,700 calories a day. In practice, most of those calories came from boredom. They came with biscuits, powdered coffee, sugar, sometimes a chocolate bar, and, oddly enough, a small pack of cigarettes. The caffeine, the sugar, the nicotine, a trinity of comfort for soldiers running on nerves and adrenaline. But tonight, as you eat, the coffee tastes more like burnt paper than caffeine. You've boiled it in your canteen cup, which also doubles as your toothbrush holder, your shaving bowl, and your soup pot. Historians still argue whether soldiers drank coffee because they loved it, or because it was the only thing hot enough to remind them they were alive. You sip anyway. It's gritty. Half the grounds are floating on top. The other half are at the bottom, waiting to surprise you later, like tiny stones. A buddy offers you a cube of army chocolate, the infamous D-ration bar. You take one bite. It doesn't melt, doesn't crumble, doesn't even pretend to be food. It's more survival equipment than dessert. Legend says it was designed intentionally to taste bad, so soldiers wouldn't eat it too fast. Mission accomplished. Across the fire, someone reads the fine print on the side of a ration box. This meal is balanced for the average man in combat. You laugh quietly, because what does that even mean? There's no such thing as an average man in combat. Everyone here is either half crazy half exhausted, or both. You pass the canteen around. Someone drops a biscuit in their coffee for a makeshift dessert, and for a fleeting second, it almost feels like civilization. The jokes start to bubble up. Food always does that. One guy says, "When I get home, I'm never eating beans again." Another swears he'll open a restaurant that serves non-army food only. You make a mental note to visit it someday, though deep down you know you probably still crave this awful coffee just a little, the same way you miss the mud, the noise, and the quiet that comes right after the shelling stops. You think about home again, about your mother's cooking, real potatoes, fried eggs, bread with actual butter. The memory feels almost too soft, too far away. You close your eyes for a second, listening to the distant crack of rifles mixed with the steady chirp of night insects. The two sounds shouldn't exist together, but here they do. Someone pulls out a tiny tin of cheese spread, and you, all groan. It's basically glue in edible form. But when you smear it on a cracker and chase it with a gulp of tepid coffee, it tastes just fine, maybe even good. Hunger is the best seasoning, they say. Hunger and exhaustion make anything taste like home. Then you remember something odd, a rumor that German rations come with schnapps and sausage. You and your buddies joke about switching sides just for the meal plan. Historians still argue whether Allied rations were worse or just more efficiently unpleasant. The debate may never end, mostly because the people who could answer definitively were too busy chewing. Your mind drifts as the night deepens. You think of the strange poetry of it all. Men sitting under foreign stars, talking about canned beans and missing their mothers. You feel the weight of your pack, the dull ache in your feet, the warmth of your half-empty belly. You're fed, you're tired, you're alive. That's enough for tonight. As you roll over on your blanket, you hear one last joke from across the camp. At least the mosquitoes like our blood better than we like the rations. You laugh, even as you drift toward sleep. The tin cans glint faintly in the moonlight, small, metallic reminders that survival isn't glamorous, but it's still worth a toast. The next morning, the world smells faintly of smoke, diesel, and reheated beans. You wake up stiff, your back complaining, your stomach already grumbling. Breakfast is technically just meal, combat breakfast unit, but that name sounds far grander than the contents deserve. You open the little waxed cardboard box and find powdered eggs or something pretending to be them and a packet labeled bacon. You smile weakly. You know better by now. The bacon is just thin, oily strips that taste faintly like regret and salt. You stir water into the powder, trying to will it into something edible. The smell rises like a ghost of breakfast past, faintly eggy, faintly chemical. You think of home again, a frying pan sizzling, the golden yolk breaking just right. This is survival food in the costume of comfort, but you eat it anyway because the day ahead will demand every ounce of energy you can borrow. Nearby, someone's trying to make coffee again, muttering like a chemist performing forbidden experiments. The grounds float, the metal cup steams, and for a moment you're all hypnotized by that tiny bit of warmth. One sip, and your whole body buzzes with the memory of mornings before the war. Historians still argue whether coffee saved more soldiers than bullets did. You chew on a biscuit, the kind that could probably stop a bullet if you angled it right. It cracks under your teeth like gravel. Someone jokes that these biscuits are the real secret weapon. Another says they could probably build a fort out of them. The laughter helps. It always does. You tuck the crumbs into your cheek like a squirrel. There's no waste here, not even of humor. Then comes the canned fruit. It's always a surprise. Sometimes peaches, sometimes pears, and sometimes a grayish mixture that defies classification. You open one can, and a faint syrupy smell hits you. Sweet, metallic, and oddly nostalgic. It reminds you of summer picnics and soda bottles, sweating in the heat. You savor each piece, closing your eyes between bites, pretending you're anywhere else. You remember that not every army was so lucky. The Japanese soldiers during the same war often survived on rice balls and pickled vegetables. The British had their bully beef, corned beef, packed so tightly in tins that it could double as building material. German troops had dark bread, sausage, and occasionally schnapps, though by 1944 even that was rare. You think of them chewing their own rations somewhere out there. All of you connected by the same small human act, eating just enough to keep moving. You take another bite of biscuit and notice how your hands have changed, thinner, rougher, more deliberate. Food feels like fuel now, not pleasure, but you still find small joys. A piece of gum after a meal, a single spoonful of canned fruit shared with someone who hasn't smiled in days. Those moments taste sweeter than anything rationed by the army. You look around. The field kitchen is a mess of smells and sound. Tin cups clinking, boots scraping, someone humming an off-key version of "Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree." You can almost pretend it's a morning back home, except for the rifles leaning against the crates and the distant rumble of artillery. Your sergeant walks by, holding his own can of scrambled eggs, looking unimpressed. He mutters, "Better than nothing," and you nod, because that's the unofficial motto of every soldier who's ever eaten in a war zone. Better than nothing. You think of how the army tried so hard to calculate everything: calories, vitamins, protein. They even studied how to make soldiers crave food less to conserve supplies. Historians still argue whether this kind of planning made rations more efficient or just more depressing. There's a strange irony in feeding millions of men scientifically, but leaving their taste buds behind. Still, the occasional surprise comes through. Someone opens a box of rations and finds a chocolate bar from Hershey's, still perfectly intact. You split it 3 ways. It melts slowly on your tongue, real sweetness that doesn't come from canned syrup. For a few seconds, everyone's silent, not from reverence, but from sheer sensory overload. It's absurd that chocolate can make you feel human again, but it does. Later, as you pack up your things, you glance at the empty cans and wrappers scattered around, their evidence of a strange kind of civilization, a mobile kitchen for an army, always on the move. Each label, each stamped instruction: open here, add water, do not consume if swollen, a small bureaucratic whisper trying to organize chaos. Before you leave, someone burns the trash pile. The cans crackle in the flames, and the smoke carries that faint, metallic tang you've learned to associate with both comfort and fatigue. You sling your pack over your shoulder and take one last look at the ashes. You realize that tomorrow's breakfast will taste exactly the same, and yet you'll still look forward to it, not for the flavor, but for the ritual. The strange alchemy of war. Even bad food becomes sacred when it's all that stands between you and hunger. You walk away from the camp, the taste of coffee still clinging to your tongue. And somewhere inside you, a small, tired voice admits that maybe, just maybe, you'll miss this someday. By the time you reach northern France, the war feels like a long meal that never ends. Same ingredients, different plates. The fields stretch around you, half trampled and half live. The smell of damp soil mixing with gunpowder and tinned stew. Tonight, you're lucky enough to be close to a mobile kitchen. The field cooks. Those unsung heroes who somehow turn mud and metal into something almost resembling dinner. You line up with your mess tin, boots heavy with dirt. The cook ladles out something brown and steaming stew, meat type. You don't ask what kind of meat, nobody ever does. You just nod your thanks, step aside, and find a patch of ground that's less muddy than the rest. Steam rises from the tin, curling into the cool air. You take a bite, and it's putable, salty, soft, comforting in a way only familiarity can be. Someone nearby grins. Tastes better than last night. You both know that's a lie, but it's the kind of lie that helps keep you sane. The field cooks deserve medals. You think medals for culinary courage. They're the ones who learned how to heat food over a Jeep engine or use tank fuel to boil coffee. Historians still argue whether those methods added more flavor or more danger. As you eat, you notice how your sense of taste has changed. The first month of the war, you craved seasoning, salt, pepper, anything. Now, you just want warmth. You crave the comfort of hot food more than the taste itself. There's something primal about it. The heat grounding you, anchoring you to the living world when everything else feels mechanical and cold. You hear someone talking about home, about the diner he used to go to every Sunday after church, about pancakes and real butter. Another soldier laughs softly and says he can't even remember what his kitchen looks like. You listen, chewing slowly, letting the sound of their voices fill the silence. Stories are seasoning, too. You remember hearing once that the average soldier consumed around 4,000 calories a day during campaigns like this, enough to fuel the endless marching, digging, and fighting. But it never feels like enough. You burn through energy faster than the army can it? You've seen guys barter cigarettes for a can of peaches, or swap coffee for a single chocolate bar. Food is currency. It's also sanity. A few men sit in a circle, passing around something they call foxhole fondue, basically. Cheese spread melted with ration crackers over a small flame. You laugh at the absurdity of it, but you take a bite anyway. It's surprisingly good. Maybe it's because you're eating it with friends. Maybe it's because you so tired you think rubber tasted fine if it were warm. You think of the people back home reading about the war in the newspapers, how they picture brave soldiers charging into glory. They never imagine this part. A group of men hunched over tin plates, talking quietly about soup. But this, more than anything, is what the war feels like. Long stretches of waiting, eating, joking, and pretending the world hasn't gone mad. One soldier near you, a kid, barely 20, pulls a can from his pack and grins. Got a British ration today, corned beef and biscuits, deluxe dining. He opens it, and immediately regrets it. The smell is strong enough to repel small animals. You all laugh until you cough. Even here, humor is nutrition. The sky is dark now, a deep navy scattered with faint stars. You find yourself staring up at them, spoon in hand, thinking about how many soldiers in history have done the same thing. Romans eating hardtack and olives. Napoleon's men chewing leather, Civil War soldiers boiling coffee over smoky fires. The food changes, but the act doesn't. Eating is the closest thing to peace in war. You scrape the bottom of your tin and find one stubborn chunk of potato clinging there. You eat it slowly, savoring it like a fine meal. Someone nearby is lighting a cigarette, the ember glowing faintly. The smoke drifts over, mixing with the smell of stew and wet grass. It's oddly comforting. You remember hearing a rumor that somewhere on the front, a few units got creative, making trench pies by mixing canned meat with crushed crackers, baking them in makeshift tins over engine heat. No one knows if that's true. Historians still argue whether such innovations were acts of desperation or genius. You like to believe they were both. The meal ends quietly. Men wipe their tins clean with bits of bread or scraps of paper. There's no ceremony, no talking, just the simple satisfaction of being full, or at least not hungry. You lean back, hands behind your head, staring at the faint moon through drifting clouds. You can hear someone snoring already, another humming softly to himself. For a moment, the front lines seem far away. You could almost believe you're camping, not fighting. The clink of metal against metal fades, replaced by the whisper of night wind through the trees. You think to yourself, someday, when all this is over, food will taste different again. Ordinary meals will feel like feasts. You'll never take warmth or flavor for granted. And maybe, just maybe, you'll miss the way this food reminded you that you were still human. You close your eyes. The last thing you smell before sleep is stew and smoke. And for the first time all day, that feels enough like peace. Morning again. The sky is pale and washed out like an old photograph. You wake up to the faint metallic clatter of mess kits, the crackle of a small fire, and that unmistakable smell, coffee, burnt just enough to remind you you're alive. You rub your eyes, your fingers gritty with dirt, and reach for your tin mug. Someone's already poured you, a bit lukewarm, slightly muddy, but you'd call it heaven in a cup. You take a sip, grimace, and still sigh contentedly. There's comfort in the ritual. That's what war teaches you, how to find peace in repetition, in the little things that don't explode. Breakfast is quick. Biscuits, a can of jam, maybe some powdered milk if you're lucky. One of the guys manages to heat water and stirs the milk powder in with his finger, muttering that it tastes like wet chalk. You grin and steal a spoonful anyway. It's awful, but it's also sweet, and that's enough. You remember reading once, before the war, that soldiers always eat the same food that can be carried, stacked and forgotten until you need it. In this war, that means rations sealed in tin and cardboard. In another, it might have been salted meat or hardtack. The form changes, but the idea stays the same. Food as survival, not as joy. Today, you're marching again. Your pack feels heavier than it should. Somewhere inside, a can of meat and vegetables clinks with every step. You wonder if it's judging you. By noon, you're sweaty, tired, and starving. So you drop into a patch of grass beside the road and decide it, slunch. You pull out your trusty can opener, the P-38, the small metal gadget every soldier carries like a sacred relic. You dig it into the lid, twisting carefully. The hiss of air escaping feels oddly satisfying, like opening a small treasure chest. Inside, a pale mixture of potatoes, carrots, and something pretending to be beef. You hold it up to the light. It glistens. You shrug. You eat. The first bite is salt and warmth. The second is less salt, more mystery. You chew slowly, your spoon clinking softly against the can. Around you, others are eating too, some talking, some silent. A few men are trading cigarettes for candy, crackers for meat. Food has become a kind of currency, a barter system that runs parallel to the war itself. Someone next to you starts telling a story about a guy who once tried to fry his rations on a tank exhaust. Supposedly, it made the stew taste smoky, like real barbecue. Historians still argue whether that story's true or just another soldier's myth. You decide it doesn't matter. In war, good stories feed the soul more than truth does. You take another bite, staring at the horizon. The fields stretch on forever, green and endless, and you realize how strange it feels to eat something so processed in a place that looks so natural. The contrast is surreal, like bringing a can of beans to a cathedral. A few birds land nearby, eyeing the crumbs you drop. You toss one a piece of biscuit, and it hops closer, unafraid. For a brief second, you feel something like calm. The world hasn't completely forgotten how to be gentle. You finish your meal and lick the spoon clean, partly because you're hungry, partly because you don't want to waste anything. Every soldier knows the rule. Nothing gets left behind. Not food, not friends, not even bad jokes. Speaking of jokes, someone shouts, "Hey, they say this stew's made from horses." Another voice replies, "Good. Maybe that's why it tastes fast." Laughter ripples through the group. It's quiet laughter, tired laughter, but it's laughter all the same. You think about the cooks again, those ghosts behind the front lines. They wake before dawn, boiling, mixing, rationing, serving men they might never meet again. They're invisible heroes, keeping everyone fed, even when supplies run low. Without them, battles wouldn't last a day. You've heard that sometimes, in rare moments, those cooks get creative, tossing in herbs or onions scavenged from a local farm. Those meals are legend, real flavor. Someone once said with awe, as if describing a miracle. You wonder if that's what heaven tastes like, something cooked with care, not instructions. After eating, you light a cigarette, not because you want it, but because it completes the ritual. Food, smoke, a moment of stillness. The ash falls onto your boot, and you don't bother brushing it away. The smoke curls lazily upward, dissolving into the bright midday sky. Historians still argue whether the rations were as bad as soldiers claimed. The official reports talk about balanced nutrition, efficient packaging, high-calorie output, but they never mention the taste of loneliness or the sound of a spoon scraping the bottom of a can under an open sky. You pack up your things, kick some dirt over the small fire, and start walking again. The sun is hot, the road endless, but your stomach is full enough, your mind just calm enough, and that's all a soldier can really ask for. You think to yourself, someday, when this is all over, You'll sit at a real table again. You'll have a plate, a fork, a napkin, maybe even seconds. And you'll tell stories about this moment, about cans and coffee, about biscuits that could break teeth, about how you once shared a can of peaches with a bird. And when someone laughs and says, "That sounds awful," you'll smile and say, "Yeah, it was." But in your heart, you'll know it also kept you human. By late afternoon, the march has ground your muscles into a steady ache. You trudge along with the others, boots squelching in the mud, packs sagging, minds half lost in daydreams of warm meals. When the order finally comes to set up camp, it feels like a blessing. You drop your pack with a sigh and immediately start thinking about food again, the only thing that seems worth the effort after hours of trudging and watchful waiting. A few soldiers are already at the mess kit, opening cans, scraping out whatever leftovers remain from the field kitchens. Tonight's main course is a mixed bag: stew, powdered eggs, and, if luck holds, a small ration of chocolate. You sit cross-legged on the grass, canteen in one hand, spoon in the other, watching the steam rise in gentle, hypnotic curls. There's comfort in the warmth, in the routine, even if the meal itself is far from gourmet. Mainstream historical fact. By 1944, the U.S. Army had perfected the standardization of rations, making sure each soldier got nearly identical nutrition wherever they were deployed. This meant that a soldier in France might eat the same thing as one in Italy or the Pacific. In theory, it was genius. In practice, it made boredom a constant companion, because predictability doesn't taste very good. You pop open a can labeled beans, type A, the contents wobbling slightly like gelatin. The smell is faintly sweet, vaguely metallic, and strangely familiar. You scoop a bite, chew slowly, and realize it's palatable, maybe even better than expected. Around you, the camp hums with the quiet sounds of eating, the clink of tins, the soft sighs of satisfaction, the occasional groan at something especially chewy or bland. Quirky tidbit: some soldiers reportedly used leftover ration tins as makeshift musical instruments. One guy in your unit bangs a spoon against a can of condensed milk, producing a rhythm that somehow improves morale. Others whistle along, creating a tiny, temporary orchestra of improvisation. Even in misery, soldiers find creativity. You glance at a neighbor gnawing on a ration biscuit like it's a rare delicacy. His face is serious, almost reverent, as if each bite could be his last. You chuckle softly because you've been there. That hard, dense cracker feels like a brick, but somehow sustains life. Historians still argue whether rations were truly nutritious or just a psychological experiment in rationing endurance. You don't care. Right now, it's all about survival. As you eat, you notice the subtle flavors that only emerge after a long day. The faint sweetness in the beans, the earthy undertone of powdered vegetables, the oily richness that clings to your spoon. Every bite is a reminder of the strange alchemy of war food, mundane ingredients transformed into sustenance by heat, hunger, and necessity. Someone nearby is complaining about the mystery meat again. You roll your eyes, but secretly you find a tiny bit of pride in the resilience it takes to eat this day after day. Each chew feels like a small victory, a silent declaration that you refuse to be defeated by mere food. A sudden gust of wind carries the smell of smoke and campfire ash. You adjust your blanket and sip some water. It's not enough to quench the dryness left by all those beans and crackers, but it's enough to keep going. Hunger never fully disappears. It just hibernates between bites. You share a small piece of chocolate with a friend. It melts instantly in your mouth, sweet and rich, a stark contrast to the rest of your meal. For a moment, you almost forget the war, the mud, the exhaustion, a tiny taste of normalcy, fleeting but vital. The conversation drifts. Men reminisce about home kitchens, favorite meals, and the rare joy of a hot dessert. One mentions pie, someone else laughs and says they'd kill for a slice of apple. You join in, not with words, but with quiet agreement, imagining flavors that don't exist in this muddy field that will probably never exist again until the war ends. By the time the meal ends, everyone is quiet, full in body, if not in spirit. The empty tins glint faintly in the firelight, small metallic monuments to survival. You fold up your blanket, sling your pack over your shoulder, and look around. The camp is calm, deceptively so. You take a deep breath, savoring the lingering taste of stew and chocolate, knowing that tomorrow the cycle will repeat. And yet, for tonight, the simple act of eating, chewing, swallowing, warming your hands on a tin cup feels like a small triumph. You settle down near the fire, listening to the soft sounds of the camp, letting the day's weariness sink into your bones. The taste of modest victory lingers, a reminder that even in chaos, there are moments of quiet, sustenance, and even comfort. Night falls softly, and the camp grows quieter, though the distant rumble of artillery never fully disappears. You lie on your back on the damp ground, your stomach full enough to sleep, but still aware of every ache, every pull of fatigue in your muscles. The last meal lingers like a half-remembered dream. Stew, biscuits, chocolate, each bite a small victory that carried you through the day. Someone nearby is tapping a spoon on a can, producing a rhythm that's faintly musical, almost hypnotic. You smile, letting your eyes close for a moment. There's comfort in this, a tiny reprieve from the relentless march of days. You chew over the strange fact that soldiers often remember the flavor of rations more vividly than the battles themselves. It's true, those tins of beans, the powdered eggs, the chocolate bars, they become landmarks in memory, more tangible than smoke-filled skies or muddy trenches. You think back to stories you've heard from older soldiers, tales of comfort rations delivered unexpectedly, a block of chocolate smuggled from home, a tin of fruit shipped with care, small gestures that carried enormous emotional weight. Historians still argue whether these treats materially improved morale or simply provided psychological relief. But you don't need a study to tell you their effect. You felt it yourself. A nearby voice murmurs about the infamous ration cheese spread, claiming it could double as glue. You laugh quietly, remembering a buddy who once used it to patch a torn boot. It's absurd, a little gross, but somehow comforting, a reminder that ingenuity thrives even in discomfort. You sip coffee from your tin mug, warm and gritty, the grounds clinging to the bottom. The bitter flavor anchors you, a contrast to the sweet memory of chocolate moments earlier. Your fingers trace the rim, cold and metal, against your skin. Tiny rituals, like licking a spoon clean or savoring each sip, become miniature celebrations of survival. Out in the distance, someone hums a tune, "Don't sit under the apple tree," or something similar. The melody drifts across the camp, soft and distorted by the night air. It's a strange comfort, a whisper of normal life in an abnormal world. You hum along faintly, letting the sound carry your mind elsewhere. 2 kitchens at home, 2 warm bread, 2 laughter over a shared meal. You pass the time scraping out the last remnants of your ration. Every bit is precious. Waste is a foreign concept here. Even the crumbs are saved, tucked into pockets, or passed along to someone else. Hunger teaches a peculiar kind of reverence for food, for routine, for fleeting warmth. The conversation drifts to rumors of enemy rations. German soldiers supposedly enjoying better chocolate, occasional sausages, and in rare cases, alcohol. You roll your eyes, knowing full well that rumor and imagination often do more to lift morale than reality. Historians still argue about the nutritional quality of Axis versus Allied rations, but for now, it's all speculative. You prefer to focus on what's tangible: warmth, hunger, satisfied, and fleeting camaraderie. You chew another piece of hard biscuit, savoring the saltiness, the resilience of it. A buddy next to you cracks a joke about it being pre-chewed by history. You laugh quietly, appreciating the absurdity. Laughter here is food for the soul, even more than the stew or chocolate. You glance around the campfire. Tin cans glint in the firelight, shadows dance across the soldiers' faces, and you realize that these small, ordinary objects, the rations, the spoons, the mugs, are anchors in the chaos of war. They represent something constant, something reliable amid uncertainty. Eventually, your eyes grow heavy. You curl into your blanket, feeling the warmth of your belly and the soft ache of tired limbs. The camp quiets further. Even the spoon tapping ceases. You drift into half sleep, still aware of the taste of chocolate, the bitterness of coffee, the warmth of stew, a sensory memory that outlasts the noise, the mud, and the endless marching. And as you fade toward sleep, you realize that in this endless rotation of rations and marches, small acts of eating and sharing have become the markers of life itself. These are the moments you'll carry, tucked away like a secret treasure, long after the war ends. Dawn breaks slowly, painting the sky in muted shades of gray and pink. You wake to the smell of damp earth, smoke, and that ever-present hint of stew lingering from last night's meal. You stretch, grimacing, as every muscle protests, and your thoughts immediately drift to breakfast, the ritual that starts every day, even when the world feels upside down. Your mess tin holds the usual: powdered eggs, a biscuit or two, and a can of meat and vegetable. It isn't glamorous, but it's enough. You scoop the eggs, gritty and pale, onto your spoon. The first bite hits your tongue, and you marvel at how endurance can transform blandness into something edible. Hunger amplifies flavor, they say, and in the middle of war, that adage is gospel. Nearby, a soldier tries to make coffee, muttering about the poor quality of the grounds. You watch as he pours boiling water over the powder, the steam curling in lazy spirals. The bitter aroma fills the camp, and you take a careful sip when it's ready. Warmth hits your stomach first, then a slow trickle of alertness spreads through your limbs. Coffee, is more than taste. It's a small, tangible reassurance that you're alive. Mainstream historical fact. By 1944, the Allies had perfected ration logistics to ensure that most frontline soldiers received daily nutrition, even in remote or recently captured areas. These efforts saved countless lives, providing enough calories and nutrients to endure exhausting marches and combat. Yet, as you've learned, calories don't translate to flavor. A quirky tidbit crosses your mind. Some soldiers would trade parts of their rations for local delicacies, like fresh fruit or cheese, when supply lines allowed. A single plum could inspire near religious gratitude. You watch as one man in your unit unwraps a small package he traded for a rare treat, and smiles like it's a feast fit for a king. You tear a biscuit in half, offering a piece to the soldier beside you. He accepts with a grin. Sharing is a subtle act of solidarity, and in the silence of war, these moments matter as much as any artillery barrage. Historians still argue whether communal eating improved morale more than official policy ever could. But from your perspective, the answer is obvious. As you eat, you notice the subtle ways soldiers adapt to their rations. Some crush biscuits into coffee, creating a gritty pseudo-cereal. Others combine the canned meat with crackers or jam, inventing new textures and flavors. Necessity breeds creativity and absurdity. You remember a joke about mystery meat pie baked in an empty ration box over a small fire. You laugh quietly to yourself, imagining the resilience required to find humor in survival food. You sip coffee again, savoring the warmth against the chill of the morning. You think about how the war transformed small acts, eating, drinking, sharing, into tiny victories. Each bite is deliberate. Each swallow is a reminder that despite exhaustion and chaos, life persists. The conversation around the camp drifts to home kitchens, favorite childhood meals, and recipes soldiers hope to recreate someday. You participate silently, letting the words wash over you. Memories of buttered toast, fresh fruit, and hot soup feel surreal here, yet comforting. They are mental nourishment alongside the physical. Someone nearby mutters about the British bully beef rations, sparking a chorus of groans and half-laughs. You remember that each army had its peculiarities, its own brand of culinary torture, yet all converged on the same goal: survival. Food is no longer just sustenance. It is a connection to home, to each other, to life itself. As breakfast ends, you scrape out every last morsel, savoring the gritty leftovers. You be careful not to waste anything. The war has taught you that even small scraps are precious. You clean your spoon and tin meticulously, placing them beside your pack, ready for the march ahead. The day stretches before you, full of marching, fatigue, and uncertainty. Yet there's a comforting rhythm. Wake, eat, move, eat, rest. Within that cycle, you find strange solace. Food is not luxury. It is endurance, ritual, and community, all at once. And even in the gray monotony of rationed meals, there is quiet poetry in the act of sustaining life. By the time you sling your pack over your shoulder, the camp is fully awake. The smell of coffee and cooked rations lingers faintly, a ghost of comfort against the morning chill. You take a final glance at the empty tins and scattered crumbs, a silent acknowledgement that in this fleeting moment you are fed, alive, and somehow still human. The afternoon drags on like thick porridge. You trudge along a dirt road, boots heavy, pack jostling your shoulders, and that familiar gnawing hunger starts to creep back. You reach for a biscuit tucked in the side pocket of your pack, hard, dry, nearly forgotten, and take a bite. Surprisingly, it feels like sustenance, almost luxurious in its simplicity. Hunger has a way of turning the blandest of rations into a feast. Nearby, a soldier opens a can of ration and winces at the smell. You can almost hear the silent sigh of despair as he stares at the gelatinous contents, wondering if he'll live through the day without regressing into a gag reflex. Humor becomes survival here, someone mutters, better than chewing your boot, and the group snickers quietly. You join in because laughter, even faint, is as nourishing as a spoonful of stew. Mainstream historical fact. During World War II, rations were designed to provide about 3,600 to 4,000 calories per day for an active soldier, taking into account the grueling physical demands of combat. Yet, calorie counts didn't account for morale. You know this instinctively because food can be sustenance without being satisfying. You remember the stories about the ingenuity soldiers displayed with their rations. Some would melt chocolate over a small flame to make a hot drink. Others would crush crackers and mix them with jam, inventing makeshift puddings. Historians still argue whether these adaptations were acts of necessity or creativity. But from where you sit, they're both. You sip coffee from your canteen, gritty and bitter, but comforting. The warmth travels slowly down your throat, easing tight muscles and shaking nerves. You take another bite of biscuit and marvel at how even small texture, the crispness, the dryness, can become sensations to savor in a world stripped of luxury. The march continues, punctuated by faint chatter, the scrape of boots, and the distant rumble of artillery. You glance at your companions, noting the ways food has altered them. Thinner faces, hands that tremble slightly, but eyes still alert. Meals have become rituals, brief reprieves where humanity flickers through the exhaustion. A soldier near you pulls out a small chocolate bar, a rare treat he saved from a care package. He breaks it into pieces and passes one to you. The sweetness is shocking, almost sacred. For a moment, you forget the mud, the guns, the endless road. Chocolate never tasted this alive. Quirky tidbit. In some units, soldiers would rank rations in order of preference and even create informal menus for the week, swapping tins and packages to balance flavor and morale. You overhear someone laughing about a ration roulette, opening a random can and hoping it's not the dreaded liver PT. The absurdity is oddly comforting. You glance around at the landscape, flattened fields, scattered trees, and a sky that seems impossibly wide. Even in the midst of war, food reminds you of home, of kitchens, of dinners that didn't involve metal tins or powdered eggs. Every bite connects you to a world beyond marching and combat, a reminder that life continues. As the march ends and the camp forms, the evening meal arrives. Cans are opened, steam rises, and soldiers begin to eat. You scoop stew into your tin, appreciating the warmth against your fingers. The flavor is simple but sufficient. Your body recognizes it as fuel, your mind as ritual. You take your time, savoring each mouthful. Around you, conversation drifts, joking, storytelling, gentle complaints about mystery meat. It's a low hum of life, human noise that contrasts with the mechanical thrum of war. Historians still argue whether these social interactions during meals had lasting psychological benefits. But you already know the answer. You finish your ration, scrape the tin clean, and set it aside. The night stretches before you, full of the quiet sounds of settling men. You lie back, feeling the residual warmth in your belly, and think about tomorrow's rations, the ongoing march, the endless repetition. Somehow, even in monotony, there is a strange comfort. And as the sky darkens and stars begin to emerge, you realize that these moments, the cans, the chocolate, the communal eating, are more than just survival. They are tiny beacons of humanity, guiding you through fatigue, hunger, and uncertainty. In these small, quiet rituals, you find a fleeting but vital connection to life. Evening settles over the camp, softening edges and muting colors into a palette of grays and browns. You sink into the dirt beside a small fire, tin in hand, and listen to the low murmur of voices blending with the crackle of flames. The day has been long, and your stomach feels heavy with ration stew, biscuits, and a smidge of chocolate, the flavors lingering faintly, comforting in their predictability. You pass your spoon slowly through the remaining contents of your tin, scraping up the last few pieces of potato and meat. The texture is odd, almost rubbery, but hunger has a way of transforming blandness into a kind of sacred indulgence. Around you, other soldiers quietly munch, sip coffee, or hum low tunes. Humor surfaces occasionally, a joke about mystery meat, or a quip about baking a trench cake in an empty can. Each laugh a small, defiant spark against the gray weight of fatigue. Mainstream historical fact: by the late stages of World War II, armies had learned to include small morale-boosting items in rations, such as chocolate, sugar, or dried fruit, recognizing that feeding the spirit was nearly as important as feeding the body. These modest treats created brief escapes from the constant grind. You remember hearing about soldiers who became experts at improvising meals, crushing crackers into coffee for a pseudo-cereal, or mixing canned meat with jam to create an ersatz pie. Historians still argue whether these innovations were born out of desperation or inventive genius. From where you sit, it doesn't matter. They are both, and they remind you that even in rigid systems, creativity persists. Sipping coffee from your tin mug, bitter and gritty, you feel the warmth slide slowly through you. The fire crackles, sending tiny sparks up into the night, and for a moment, everything else falls away. The mud, the gunfire, the endless marching. This small ritual, eating, sipping, sitting quietly, anchors you. Food has become more than sustenance. It is meditation, connection, and reassurance all at once. A buddy next to you unwraps a small chocolate bar, offering a piece to anyone who wants it. The sweetness hits like a tiny explosion of normalcy. You savor it, letting it dissolve slowly on your tongue. It's absurdly luxurious, considering the monotony of ration life. Around you, men share stories of home kitchens, favorite meals, and the rare indulgences they dream of. These memories season the present, much like herbs would flavor a bland stew. You notice how everyone has adapted to their rations. Eating becomes ritualized, careful measurement, scraping tins clean, conserving every morsel. Some even trade tins for items they prefer: candy, cigarettes, or a slice of fruit. In this strange barter economy, food is currency, comfort, and camaraderie. Quirky tidbit: there were tales of soldiers crafting makeshift stoves from biscuit tins and small flames, boiling water, or warming stew with whatever scraps they could find. The ingenuity is almost comical, yet undeniably practical. You smile, imagining the clumsy contraptions and the satisfaction of a hot meal, no matter how humble. As the night deepens, the conversation tapers off. You lean back, letting the firelight paint shadows across tired faces. Each bite you've taken today, each sip of coffee, and each scrap of chocolate contributes to a sense of continuity, a small thread tying you to life, to home, to something beyond the immediate demands of war. Historians still argue whether these everyday rituals were truly significant to soldiers' survival. But sitting here, it feels undeniable. The camp settles into a hush. Only the faint murmur of conversation and the occasional crackle of fire remain. You cradle your tin, savoring the final warmth of food in your hands. There's a strange serenity in the repetition of these small acts, a rhythm that contrasts sharply with the chaos outside the camp. And as you lie back to rest, eyes tracing the flickering shadows, you realize that food has become much more than fuel. It is memory, humor, companionship, and solace. Every meal, no matter how simple, is a small assertion of humanity in a world that constantly demands you survive. The night is still broken only by the occasional whisper of wind through the trees and the soft clink of tin against tin as soldiers finish their final rations. You lie on the damp earth, stomach comfortably full, body tired from the day's march, yet restless in that familiar, soldierly way. Even with the routine of meals, sleep doesn't come easily. Your mind drifts to the peculiar flavor of the morning biscuit, the richness of yesterday's chocolate, the endless monotony of canned stew. You watch a nearby buddy attempt to make a last-minute cup of coffee, muttering complaints about the grounds and the taste, but taking small sips anyway. Coffee, you realize, has become both a ritual and a balm, a thread of normalcy in a life otherwise dictated by orders, mud, and distant gunfire. Historians still argue whether the psychological comfort of these rituals outweighed their nutritional value. But in this quiet hour, the answer seems obvious. You remember stories from other soldiers, legends of gourmet improvisers who could turn a tin of mystery meat and a few crackers into something resembling a pie or stew. Sometimes these creations were edible. Sometimes they were barely distinguishable from glue. But the effort itself mattered, a reminder that even small gestures of creativity could push back against the relentless grind of military life. A faint laugh drifts across the camp, someone joking about caffeine-less coffee, or the ever-present smell of burned ration biscuits. You smile, letting the humor wash over you. Laughter, here, feels almost edible, a subtle nourishment alongside the heavy tins and powdered eggs. Mainstream historical fact: soldiers often consumed the same rations for weeks on end, relying on ingenuity, imagination, and shared storytelling to maintain morale. The repetitive diet might have seemed monotonous, yet it formed the backbone of daily survival. The smell, taste, and ritual of these meals provided more than calories. They offered psychological stability. You reach for a scrap of chocolate, savoring the sweetness as it melts on your tongue. Around you, others nibble, sip coffee, and quietly trade scraps. Food has become more than sustenance. It is camaraderie, a tiny shared language that transcends exhaustion and fear. You bite slowly, letting each morsel linger, aware of how hunger and deprivation have sharpened every sense. Quirky tidbit: some soldiers used ration tins as percussion instruments, tapping out rhythms while cooking or eating. The makeshift music becomes a gentle soundtrack to the evening, almost like a lullaby. You hum along softly, letting the sound settle your mind as the fire flickers and shadows dance. The camp slowly quiets. Tin mugs are wiped clean, empty cans stacked carefully, and wrappers tucked away. Every small act of tidiness feels like a declaration. Life continues, no matter the chaos around you. You lie back on your blanket, feeling the residual warmth of the day's meals in your body. The taste of stew, chocolate, and bitter coffee lingers, comforting and grounding. Your thoughts drift to home kitchens, warm bread, and family meals, imagined flavors that seem both impossible and necessary. Even in this muddy, noisy world, these sensory memories tether you to normalcy. Each bite, each sip, each shared scrap with a comrade becomes a small victory against the dehumanizing grind of war. As your eyes grow heavy, you recognize the quiet truth. Food in war is never just food. It is ritual, memory, humor, and survival. A tiny assertion of humanity in an environment designed to erode it. The last sips of coffee, the final bite of biscuit, the faint laughter in the distance, all of it lingers. A gentle reassurance that life persists even in the mud, the blood, and the endless march. You close your eyes, listening to the soft sighs and occasional coughs of men settling down for the night. The flavors, smells, and rituals of the day settle into memory, a silent feast to carry you into dreams. Tomorrow will bring another march, another ration, another challenge. But for now, you are full, fed, and human. Wind down, the night stretches slowly, soft and unhurried. You lie on the cool earth, blanket pulled tight, letting the lingering warmth from your simple meals settle into your body. Every bite of stew, every sip of bitter coffee, every scrap of chocolate you shared or saved has woven itself into the quiet rhythm of your evening, a gentle counterpoint to the chaos outside the camp. Your muscles ache, yes, but your mind feels lighter, held in the steady embrace of routine and ritual. You trace the edges of your tin mug, remembering the subtle textures and flavors of the day, the comforting weight of a can in your hands, the faint metallic taste that has become oddly familiar. The fire crackles softly nearby, shadows dancing lazily across the faces of the men around you. Their quiet hums, whispers, and laughter, low, tired, contented, mix with the soft sigh of wind through the trees, a lullaby for the weary. In these moments, even the simplest meals carry meaning. A biscuit scraped clean, a shared piece of chocolate, a lukewarm cup of coffee, they are symbols of endurance, small victories in a world turned upside down. Hunger and fatigue recede into the background, replaced by a sense of calm, a connection to life, to companionship, to something enduring beyond the march and the mud. Historians still argue about the impact of rations on morale, but you already know it is the care, the ritual, and the small moments of human connection that sustain you most. Slowly, your eyelids grow heavier. The smells, tastes, and textures of the day fade into memory, like embers cooling in the fire. The sounds of the camp soften. The wind hums quietly through the trees, and your mind drifts gently toward sleep. Tonight, you rest full, content, and human, carried into dreams by the simplest, most enduring truths: warmth, nourishment, and the quiet bonds of shared survival. Sweet